But it's very exciting. I think this, or I know, it's clear as day, this kind of activity fosters business, right? You know, meeting with each other, brainstorming, collaborating, even the topic today, how do you discuss this with a client? How do you get comfortable, you know, talking about new laws with clients? We're also going to touch on non-contingent deals. As the market opens, we're going to see more non-contingent deals. So how do you, you know, massage that when it comes, and how do you protect your clients? But Leonard, you want to say a few words about NYRAC and your involvement and your thoughts?
Sure, I think the one thing that we all collectively came together with when we put NYRAC together, and it is a collective effort, it was our desire to elevate the ethics and the standards of what we do, combined with a whole host of other value adds. But I think one of the greatest value adds I am finding is, just recently, I needed a certain data point. And there was an agent who had that data point. Only that agent would have that data point. It doesn't exist anywhere. And I picked up the phone and I called that agent and I asked. And that agent happened to be a NYRAC member too. And I got that data point in 2 seconds. And when I look at the value of that, I get my calculator out and I cannot find the keys to determine a dollar price for that. That's invaluable. And to me, that is probably the greatest one of all, because there's a level of trust. That agent knows if they need help from me, I'm immediately accessible, as are they. And I think there's this sense of collaborative professionalism amongst NYRAC members that is truly valuable and has been enormously valuable to me.
And I think in today's market, we really all need to work together to not only present a cohesive front, but to help each other with pricing and feedback. And really, it's got to be more of a collaborative group, and we need to be seen that way, and as professionals that work together and respect each other. And I think that's more important than ever, that we're all, you know, connected and friendly with each other and respectful and help each other.
I think we've also made probably a mistake, not anyone in this room, but I think we've made a mistake as a community to message to the world that we're tough and strong as being sharks, or as, you know, wanting to win and being killers. And whereas that may appeal to a small group of people, I would say that narrative has been extremely damaging to all of us. And I think we are seeing part of the price we pay for that in that this narrative. Sorry, I ate something. That narrative is really, really damaging when you go in front of a jury, right? The jury picks up that perception and thinks these people, they don't need defending, they don't need an income, they're all earning too much, it's all too easy. So I do think our ability as a community to truly message what we do, which we know we do. The good news is we don't have to create a narrative or fake anything. The truth is a lot different to the narrative that has been messaged over the last 10, 15 years. That's a false narrative. Now we can actually message the truthful narrative, and in doing so, I think collaborating with one another and working together as opposed to one another is another message that is a very healthy one to send to the consumer, because the consumer does not want to see us as pariahs.
And the last thing that we will say on NYRAC, and then we'll turn it over to Andrew, is that as an organization, as a group of people, we've never had our own voice. It's either REBNY, it's the owners, it's the operators. And when the pied-à-terre tax was put forth, a group of NYRAC members rented a van and drove to Albany and were heard and listened to, and there were very valid arguments put forth. And it's so important for us to be able to have a strong voice. And the more members we have, the stronger our influence is going to be when we go to Albany and bring things up and try to fight new taxes and things that will negatively impact all sellers. So
we were actually quite stunned at that one meeting where we went up to Albany and subsequent other meetings.
And City Hall.
City Hall,
yeah.
where we found
we
that
were heard.
These politicians had the same impression that the regular consumer has about us, because where did they get their narrative from? Not from any representation. You know, none of us were really being represented. And when they heard what we were giving them that was fact-based, it wasn't BS. You know, we told them detailed data of what agents earn, what it takes to earn that. They were kind of stunned, they were shocked. So I think accuracy in narratives today is something we're fighting everywhere. And I actually just wrote about it this morning, how there was a headline in the New York Post, and this is not political because all media is guilty of this. There was a headline in the New York Post a week ago, and I waited a week to write about it in the hopes that in 1 week it would be corrected. And it was speaking of how the real estate markets are under this enormous duress. I can't remember the exact headline, but it's basically implied that the housing market was going to go through this $700 billion crash. It took a quote from a very prominent Wall Streeter. I was like, really? And then I read the article. It was purely about commercial real estate, predominantly about office space, which is $3 trillion out of the $20 trillion commercial space, to put it into perspective. It's that small percentage, 15%. And that article then, I Googled the tagline and found it in so many additional places, re-messaged, repurposed, and then rebroadcast via social media, that I'm convinced, by my calculations, 100 million people read that narrative, which becomes truth, which is fake, which is false, which is inaccurate, which is damaging, because all of us in this room then work with a buyer or a seller, say, oh, look at it. And like, really? So this is another area where we can be very advantageous. So I'm going to hand it over to Hannah.
And Anna can work with anybody who'd like to sign up or get more information, so.
Come by me after.
Gift with purchase.
We'll send an email to everybody as well. But I think just from my vantage point, listen, you don't have to be intimately involved in bringing up the community, but you should have some involvement, right? Because especially for each of you as independent contractors, you're kind of each on your own island. And if there isn't community, who's going to bring the profession up? So it's important that, especially, I mean, now it's glaring, right? Now with the industry, there really isn't a choice. So to protect, your profession, it's critical. You are, in New York City, you are the doctor, you are the lawyer. The money's real here, right? And the transactions are real and they're sophisticated. Before I get to the topic, I recently I'm always thinking about, ways to improve service. I came up with a due diligence hack. And I actually want to apologize for not bringing this to the table 10 years ago. Something very simple. As the market picks up, right, there's going to be competing offers. And we're going to have to turn around deals at a higher level and quicker. I always thought, I had the misconception that you get an accepted offer, deal sheet comes, within an hour or two. But I guess typically it could take a day or two, right? Somebody didn't retain an attorney yet, somebody's on vacation, you're waiting for the managing agent information. If you are the buy side, once you know the offer is accepted or about to be accepted, if you have a relationship with the attorney, if you have a relationship with us, email the attorney and say, hey, this is the property address. If you have the managing agent's information, great, we probably can get it ourselves. Let's start on due diligence Monday instead of waiting till Wednesday when we get the deal sheet. Especially as the market picks up, right? We want to get things done quicker. The managing agents are going to take 2 days to get back to us. So imagine I get a deal sheet, I'm on the buy side, and I let the seller's broker know, say, hey, by the way, we're already in touch with the managing agent, we already provide the questionnaire check, they said it's going to take 5 to 7 business days. We just cheated 2 days, right? Just a little thing, and that's kind of when the market, picks up and how to have a competitive advantage and how to impress clients. We have a due diligence team, so very easily, if I put 5 more deals into our pipeline, it's just collecting data, right? It's just reaching out and no heavy lifting. So something to think about, just a little bit of a hack that can save a deal and separate you from the competition. The topic at hand.
With sound effects.
It's that,
It's probably the basketball. They're actually cheering for us. So that's a good thing. So the new law applies to 1 to 4 family homes. It does not apply to co-ops or condos. It does not apply to co-ops or condos even if it's 2 or 3 units. The idea of the law, right? We remember the horrible accident in Surfside, right, where the building collapsed. The banks and our country and our community are very focused right now on health and safety, right? The banks are paying attention to Local Law 11, which they've never cared about before. They're paying attention to deferred maintenance, assessments that have been going on for a long period of time. So, when you're representing a seller, and for all of you who have been in the business for a while, you may not know, there's a property disclosure form, and I'll email it to you as well, that is applicable to every deal you've ever done for the past 20 years. But the funny part is, the sellers, instead of filling out this property disclosure form, which is very thorough, very detailed, instead of filling it out, they have the option of providing the buyer with a $500 credit instead of filling out the form. So every seller provides the credit. As of March 20th, deals that go into contract by March 20th, before March 20th, you're good. But as of March 20th, the seller no longer has the option of providing the credit. They must fill out this property disclosure form, right? Some basics. The seller fills it out before the contract's signed. It's provided to the buyer. You do not fill it out. Let me repeat. You do not fill it out. I don't care if your client is in Africa on safari and they call you and it's frantic. There's liability. There's exposure. You need to protect yourself. A little breath of fresh air. I know you have a home in Connecticut. Every state in the country, I believe, except for New York, this is so common, right? The disclosure form is provided at open houses.
Yeah. Yes.
So this is new, and it's another form. Yes, you're exhausted with documents that you have to provide to sellers these days. But within a few months, March 20th, by the summer, it's going to be part of normal course of business. I don't think it's going to be a major dilemma or an issue for you or a headache, but you have to get used to it and get comfortable with it. So this disclosure form, and the reality is, think about it, you have an exclusive. First, I welcome your thoughts, I would get the exclusive and then talk about this, right? You don't need to bring this form to the exclusive or when you're pitching the exclusive. After you get the exclusive, the seller's attorneys aren't involved. You can maybe loop us in to help you, but typically, hopefully you get an accepted offer quickly. It could take months, right? But I would highly recommend providing the form to the seller early on so they have time to digest it and look at it. Now, the form that is provided right now is supposed to be updated before March 20th. And interesting, talking about health and safety, they're adding a lot of questions about leaks, about floods. If everybody recalls, summer, spring, fall, the amount of rain we had, right, in our city, in the state, I don't know about the country, but it was, I think it was historic. So the state is aware of this, the governor is aware of this, and this is one of the reasons for the new law. This is one of the reasons for adding these disclosure questions. From a legal perspective, this is very important, and I have a little outline I'll send to you as well. The standard is the seller's actual knowledge. Actual knowledge is a term I learned in law school. It means what they actually know. It doesn't mean what they should know. Constructive knowledge means what they should know. So we're changing the standard. Before it was another Latin term, caveat emptor, means buyer beware, as is, right? Now the seller has to provide information that they know. My fireplace, right? We have a huge storms, and it happens often. There's a little trickle that comes down my fireplace. We've had, the roof guy come a few times, the fireplace professional come. They just can't fix it. So I should disclose that. I would highly, highly encourage your clients to be transparent, right? This isn't like a game. This is a legal form. Now, interesting from my perspective. First, you can loop us in early. We can help you. It has to be provided to the buyer before the contract's signed. But typically, if the seller's living there, they're going to fill it out. It may incentivize or push sellers to make repairs, right? It has to be your actual knowledge as of the day you fill it out. So if you get exclusive, you talk about the document, the disclosure, and there are these three minor issues. Maybe we cure those issues. Maybe we have a repair person come in, and then we fill out the form a month later or 2 weeks later, right? Just like some strategy, right? Maybe, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just instructed somebody to have an inspection.
Yep.
Because I said, you've got to be sure about the condition. And he said, I'm just going to have an inspection, I'm going to fix everything, and that will be the solution.
Can we talk generally about your deal without getting into specifics? That it's a raw space. Like, what if the seller doesn't know much, or maybe they do know a lot, but so there's a lot to fill out, right? So think about a raw space, right? Whether it's a one-to-family home. Think about an absentee owner, right? You have to, you'll see there's a section, if you know something, if you don't know something, not applicable, right? So a lot of sellers, and this, it's not like for buyers, I'm thinking about the worst case scenario, it's not like I gotcha, right? This isn't a game. So if this seller provides it accurately, right? And if they do or don't get an inspection, by the way, the state form, it still says we highly encourage buyers to conduct their own inspection. I spoke to a few litigators. There's different kinds of actions that can be brought, and there's different statute of limitations. It depends on if it's misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, anywhere from 3 to 6 years. Most of the purchasers are not going to bring an action, right? It would be very egregious, for them. And the nice thing is there are inspections and there is this form. So something to pop up a year later that wasn't disclosed or didn't know about it, it's not going to happen often. Of course, it could happen.
Does anything pointedly survive a closing?
So great question. The disclosure form, right, provides actual knowledge. The interesting thing is our contracts are going to probably be more limited. Most townhouse deals, the contract's more limited than the disclosure. The contract doesn't survive closing. However, a misrepresentation on a contract or the disclosure form not necessarily survives closing, but you can bring an action.
Right.
Theoretically, practically speaking, it does survive. Right? Everybody follow that? If you lie, that survives closing because there's statute of limitations to bring a lawsuit. Has anybody seen this in other states, or anybody that has vacation homes or second homes?
Just one thing I would say about getting sellers to be incentivized to do what Pamela just suggested, which is to get an inspection prior to listing. It's an expense, and oftentimes there's pushback. But the best way to incentivize my sellers has been telling them, look, you don't have to do this, but I guarantee you that any sane buyer is going to do an inspection of this house. And when they discover what they discover, they will identify a cost associated to that. They will renegotiate, and I promise you, it'll be significantly more expensive than you addressing these issues yourself. Significantly more expensive. We have seen allowances of $10,000 for a $500 fix, just because it's a round number and everyone exaggerates like crazy at a closing table. So just use that, if anything, to incentivize sellers to want to do this, because there's something great about having an inspection happen, because a lot of times smart buyers are also doing engineers' inspections before they sign a contract, because no one wants that contingency.
I just had somebody do 3, and they were 3 totally different reports. And I at first said, well, it's a little excessive, and then I thought, Pamela, just close your mouth and let them go, and we'll get 3 3-hour accesses. And they were like, here are all the things from the 3, we put it all together. Not one inspection had the same things. It was, and I now say, have as many inspections as you'd like.
Well, if you read the disclaimers on the inspection,
Yeah.
they could like walk through with blinders.
So, and I also think it's market driven, right? If the market is hot and there are many offers, the seller will be less incentivized to make, repairs. If the market is, lagging or dragging, then of course it motivates. Just a few points on inspection, because that's like, pins, in the seller's back and for you as real estate brokers. First of all, my rule of thumb is obviously 1 to 4 family homes, 100%. Usually for a co-op or condo, 10 to 15 units and under, because you have a bigger piece of the pie. And the real answer is inspectors typically don't even get access to the major systems of the building for larger buildings. So 10, 15 units, they can actually, you're not worried about, or you're not overly concerned about the unit, you're concerned about the building typically, right? Some of these smaller buildings, you have your own boiler setup, or you share a boiler with a few units. And I always tell clients, number one, an inspection is typically not a means to renegotiate unless there's a material issue, right? When I get the inspection report back, or if the client gets it back, I tell them before you read it, email the inspector. Are there red flags? Are there major issues? They should be there for the inspection, because you read a report, it sounds like the world's coming to an end, literally. Inspectors have to protect themselves. So you're there, and the report says the water pressure is a 7 out of 10. You were there, and you see that it's the same water pressure you currently have, and it's perfect. Those are the main points. I feel like I'm missing one.
I would encourage everyone, by the way, if there's one resource to have on your resource folder, it would be have window experts.
Yes.
Because one of the biggest areas of concern in most buildings is leaks from windows and skylights. Especially in houses, you might have more skylights. But the window issue is the biggest one I have found repeatedly. And if you have a window expert, you can bring them in, you can get it resolved quickly, you can identify cost if that's just a line item that needs to be addressed. but that resource is very valuable.
I think my exception to the 10, 15 units is if it's a larger building and it's a penthouse, right, and there's skylights and.
Well,
All
any
penthouses
penthouse,
leak.
any penthouse
Everyone.
would
Yes,
have that.
yes, right.
I'm finding, frankly, I tell people right up front that many people now in co-ops and condos are having the apartments inspected, and that's become a new normal, and I tell them about it, and, you know, they find the dishwasher isn't hooked up properly, their pinhole leaks in the faucet of the sink, and I think you have to offer, especially in this new world where might be representing the buyer and being paid by them, you have to offer all the tools so that if they say, I don't wanna spend that, they know in writing, you have suggested that it is something you can do, that they can have.
There's one thing
So
worse though than engineer inspection, and that is a really A-grade contractor inspection. I had one in a new building, brand new building, 3,000 plus per square foot building, and the contractor who came is truly one of the top contractors in the New York area. And they spent 9 hours in the apartment, and if I showed you the punch list, it was humiliating. It was truly humiliating, and you know what, it was great, because that was the first unit to close. We handed it to the developer, and it was black and white to see that the quality of what was being installed, while cosmetically looked exquisite, had to go back and fix a whole host of things that ultimately would have come to haunt them later at a much greater expense. So it was actually a favor to everyone at the table. But sometimes an amazing contractor is much more knowledgeable about the issues that really matter in an inspection.
And you don't want to sweep this under the rug. If a client brings it up, you know, initially, and you don't pretend like you didn't hear it, because it's going to come up once the lawyers are involved. Inspections are fine as long as it's done quickly, right? You got an accepted offer on a Monday. Let's be in there by Tuesday or Wednesday, right? So we have the report by Friday. We're still waiting on the questionnaire, right? So just be super proactive with it. Any question? Yes.
Is it just, does the disclosure form just pertain to structural? What about, for example, a townhouse where a tenant's not paying rent?
No, it's just structural health and safety issues. That would be disclosed hopefully in the contract. The buyer's attorney would ask for information on that.
You had mentioned it has to be given before they sign a contract. Is there an amount of time before they sign a
No.
contract?
So for us, I mean, I'm thinking out loud as a seller's attorney, before I release, excuse me, the full executed contract, I'm going to want confirmation from the buyer's attorney that the buyer received it.
Well, shouldn't we get it with the exclusive, shouldn't it?
I wouldn't.